Me knowing that actually I can recover from even the most horrific traumatic experiences I've had, and then a little bit of information about what can help, blows open the world.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Missions That Made Them. I am your host, Jason Verdelli. This isn't just a podcast, but rather it's a movement. It's a movement designed to make the world a better place by bringing more awareness to the great work of the people and organizations making a difference, and more importantly, how are you going to help? We live in a world today surrounded by a narrative in the media that focuses in on negativity and draws attention to the problems, but not the solutions. Our guests represent the solutions, not the problems. And with that, I am super excited today to have an amazing guest on, and it really represents an amazing organization, what they're doing, amazing growing organization, Elaine Walters with the Trauma Healing Project. And we're going to learn everything about how this organization is really supporting the community and really changing lives. I think transforming lives as I see it. I was on their website. Just a lot of exciting things, a lot of events, a lot of different things that these guys are doing to grow and to make this world a better place, which is what this podcast is all about, is how you as a listener, the viewer, can get involved and to be a part of this movement that we're having here. So without further ado, Elaine, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Fantastic. So tell everybody about the Trauma Healing Project. What is the organization about?
So the Trauma Healing Project actually rose out of a need that we identified in our community. There was a lack of understanding of the impact of trauma, the various service systems and responses that a person might get if they'd experienced trauma, had very different ways of addressing and dealing with people, and many of them not so helpful. And so a group of about 40 people came together 17, 18 years ago, really sort of with a similar sentiment. We were a group of folks that had been impacted in our own lives by trauma, but also many of us were working in fields that were working with people impacted by trauma. We had students, we had community members, we had survivors of the mental health system, all come together sort of saying, things are not going well for us. Systems and programs and services that we spend a lot of money and resource sort of creating and running are not helping people be or do or function better once they've been through them. So we were a ragtag group of people that said we got to do something different. And so our very first effort was really a bunch of learning ourselves. We continue to provide education and training and co-learning opportunities to learn not just about the impact of trauma, but the possibility of healing. So we provide training and education within our community and beyond. We also now really consult with a lot of organizations that are trying to do better and be more sensitive to the needs of the people in their care. But we also have a healing arts program where community members can come and receive direct services and support for healing the trauma that they may have experienced. Yeah,
that's awesome. So they can come into the location, your location there, and say, "Hey, I need help," right? And I'm sure you're open arms in that.
We are the most open arms experience I've ever been. You walk into our place, and this has happened hundreds and hundreds of times. Sort of, you find our sign, you find our corner on the street and our doorway, and walk in the door, and the very first thing that happens is somebody among us offers you a cup of tea and a place to sit, and maybe a corner where you can read books and talk to somebody. And so pre-pandemic, we were seeing probably 500 people a year that would fit that description, coming to use resource or meet with us. Pandemic hit, and we moved as many things as we could virtually, so that we continued to provide opportunities for people to stay connected to us. And we've done a lot of phone calls during the pandemic, and we are thankfully getting to reopen our doors again. And so we have acupuncture, for example, and our clinics are both completely full, and they are low or no cost for people to access those, as well as other resources and services. Yep.
How before getting anything else, I mean, how do you offer this at no cost?
Well, this has been quite the feat. One of the ways we've been able to offer it at no cost, no and low cost, is that we have had an incredible array of practitioners of healing arts that want to learn more about how to work with survivors of trauma and want to give back. And so we've had a lot of practitioners with a lot of skill and experience want to come and work with us and learn from us, who've been able to provide at least a certain amount of support at no charge. So they are volunteers. They may take a stipend or a very small amount of pay to make it possible for them to work with us. But the caliber of service and resource that we've been able to provide has been completely based on the caliber and quality of the people walking in our doors saying we want to help. So it's been phenomenal, actually.
How that is amazing. I always love to hear the stories of people that have the talents, they maybe professional experience, or acupuncturists that say, "Hey, how can I help?" Right? They have their business, their job, whatever it is that they do to monetize their talents, but then joining an organization as great as this to be able to provide it to people that really need the help. I mean, how are these people being attracted to the organization? How are they finding out about the organization, like your acupuncturist and so forth?
You know, we've done some recruitment. We've reached out. You can get lists of certain kind of practitioners and reach out to the community. But also, I would say most of it has been one of two ways. It's been word of mouth. They heard somebody that knows somebody that's been a part of it. And they are interested, or they may have had their own history of trauma that they've been able to heal from, and they seek out opportunities to learn more and to give back in ways either that they did get help or that they didn't get help. And so people actually seek us out as well. So I'll talk a little bit later about some of the growth that we're seeing and the goals that we have, but that's really how people have come in our doors. And it's been a really important range of resources. So acupuncture is one example, but we've had cranial sacral therapists, massage therapists, Reiki practitioners, and other energy workers, people teaching yoga and other kinds of movement. We have a NIA class that's been very consistently happening, as well as weekly support groups in English and in Spanish, facilitated by people who are really wanting to learn and hone their skills in working with people in community and in groups. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Well, do you find with the trauma, the people that you're serving, right? Mm-hmm. Do you find that there's a common thread amongst them when they're coming in? I mean, are they at a point in their life or their experience, maybe the experience that they're going through, is it immediate, or is it something where maybe they've had something traumatic happen and then maybe it's like a few months later or something? What's the typical, what do you typically see, or is it a variance of all, like, kind of immediate and then later?
That is such an interesting question. What we do see the range. So we have had people referred to us by their physician or somebody else in the community that has just recently or just experienced a tragedy or a trauma in their lives. And people who come in that are just wanting to recover from things that happened years and years ago that they know are still affecting them. Often it's both. Often we have somebody who's had something recent happen, which is why they may initially reach out, but what they end up really working on and addressing and learning about is the influence of earlier traumas in their life. Trauma tends to kind of happen in layers. It's the generational and historical trauma that many of us carry, being born into the families and the situations that we're born into, all the way to the direct things that happen to us early in our lives and then later in our lives. And there's kind of a layering effect. And when you do trauma healing work, you're often working to address all the layers. Anyway, the work that I am the most interested in addresses working with the deeper and further back layers that tend to be still impacting individuals, families, and wider communities. Mm-hmm.
You're right though, because I mean, people that are going through that, there is a lot more than just at the surface level, right? There usually is some sort of past event, and then other things have happened because of that, and then other things have happened because of that, and you start to build these layers. And for somebody to know to go deeper into that, that's a very important process to get to, because that's the core of the apple, right, or the nucleus of the cell.
It can be. It can be, and sometimes it's because of, there's this and then this and then this and then this, but also it's just situational. There are some of us that are just more situationally likely to experience multiple kinds of traumas in our lives. And that same group of us are also set up to receive the least support for recovery and healing. And so that's what we find as well, is that there's this kind of compounding impact of both the things that happen that hurt us and the lack of resource and support and knowledge about healing that are part of the picture. Mm-hmm.
Do you find there's a certain segment in the community that's more prone to that?
That's also a really interesting question. What we know is that trauma is actually very prevalent for all of us, that if you look at some population-based research that just ask people what their life experiences have been, there's a study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. Many of your listeners may know about it and may be learning about what the implications are, that really connects 10 different categories of adversity to impacts on health and functioning. And in that study, they listened to over 15,000 people. In that study, over 17,000 people, I think, actually. And what they found is that a very high percentage, somewhere between 65 and 68% of this group of people that they talked to had experienced at least one significant and potentially traumatizing adversity in their lives. So the reality of reenactment in families and hurt being passed down and hurts happening in communities is really prevalent. That said, as I mentioned, some of us who are living in environments where our neighborhood's not safe, or we've had to leave our home because of violence or war happening, where we've had to emigrate to get to safety, may have been exposed at higher levels in more concentrated ways to certain kinds of traumatic experience. And as I said, also situationally may have had less resource to recover from those experiences. And so I wouldn't name a particular population, but I could name any of those circumstances. It's not about who we are. It's about what's happening to us, and historically maybe what's happened to our people, and what our communities have been exposed to.
So very situationally based, and obviously that bad things can happen to anybody, right? So it's like, we're not, it's not like, it's around us all the time, and if the pandemic's kind of taught us anything is that we're really not all, at the end of the day, there's just something that's big enough that it can be more traumatic to certain people too, right? Some people are going to take it one way, and other people are going to take it a different way. So,
and even how we take it is more about circumstance and our history than about our temperament. So we work really hard to have people understand that some of us are set up because of the structures in society to be more impacted, and it doesn't really have to do with our personality or our temperament or our genetics. It has to do with what's happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. that's very, very true. Very true. So Elaine, tell us a little bit about, I mean, what I love about what you're doing, though, is you are providing the solution specifically to the healing side of this, right? It's but it's also awareness side. I think I like the both sides, right? It's the, educating employers, educating organizations on this. I mean, what do you see when it comes to organizations, particularly like the businesses that you're dealing with? How are they taking, I mean, some of the ones that you maybe interact with, how are they handling it? And for those that have worked with you, what are they sort of saying once you get in there and you're like, okay, this is what you need to look for, everything else? I mean, have they given you any kind of feedback from those experiences and that?
Oh, well, one of the ways we get feedback from our training and consultation work is that we have more work than we're able to say yes to right now. So there's been kind of a confluence actually of need being expressed in organizations and in communities that has been building for a while. The awareness and the understanding of the impact of trauma on the communities of people that we live with and are trying to serve has been sort of growing. So our understanding of the impact and influence of trauma has been growing. So has the expression and disclosures that many people are sharing, and the fact of social media and people actually talking more openly about sort of interpersonal trauma. That's part of the movement. And the voices of those same sort of survivors and people with lived experience that have experienced trauma really kind of coalescing around demands for better treatment and better opportunities for healing and resource, right? So that kind of combination together has really driven sort of both the knowledge side of things and the demand for the resource to get better and more effective. And so our work has been since the very beginning not to provide one-on-one healing or to be the place that anybody could come to get healing, although we have that resource for a small percentage of our population in our local community, for example. Our work has really been this other side of things, and that is to really help people understand the need for and the potential for healing and recovery that they can actually help facilitate. And so an organization that is working with, so I'll just give you a couple of big giant systems that almost primarily 100% work with survivors of trauma. One of those is law enforcement. Law enforcement organizations are primarily interacting with people that are both potentially causing trauma to others, but also come from being harmed themselves at very high sort of rates, right? And so law enforcement, another very big system that we invest a lot into, for better or worse, is our child protection systems. You know, the systems of people that get engaged when child abuse has been identified. 100% of the children in those systems have been traumatized and exposed to things that are not healthy or safe for human beings, but so have their parents and families and the communities that they're part of. So that system deals almost exclusively with trauma. Churches, schools, any other social service system where people are congregating after hard experiences are places where there are populations of people who have been impacted by and continue to carry the impacts of trauma. And so the big flip from my perspective is helping people understand that it is the trauma itself that needs to be addressed. The kinds of injuries that people are inflicting on each other and being exposed to absolutely needs to be stopped and prevented. But the path to do that is full healing and recovery from people that have experienced those things already. Getting in there with parents, getting in there with people who have caused harm, getting in there with people who are young people who aren't parents yet, so that they get a chance to recover their full humanity and their full functioning after lots of trauma, really is, to me, the primary intervention and prevention that we can do to prevent further harm. And so we know a lot about healing from trauma from our cultures and our wisdom keepers that go back tens of thousands of years, but we haven't actually tapped into that wisdom and knowledge base in the way that we can. We're beginning to notice that people have things to offer here, and we're beginning to listen, but that's where we make that's central, is listening to the wisdom of survivors and to building the knowledge base around how to support healing. So if I'm working with a police officer, for example, helping them understand what they're seeing and why they're seeing what they're seeing, and maybe how to interact in a way that de-escalates a situation rather than adds fuel to a fire that makes things worse, is that one-on-one work we can do with individuals who are out on the front lines, but also building structures where there is actually a knowledge base so that the police officer and the people that they're encountering can get attention and support to fully recover. So that it's not just better ways of talking and communicating and supporting each other, but that the resource for where they can go and receive information and get to participate in their own healing process is readily available and provided at many, many different doors.
Yeah. What I love about that too is that, it is the knowledge base, as you mentioned, with your police officers and your churches, people that are at the ground level with society, really, right? They see, and they're also like at the ground level where trauma happens. And for people to be aware about how to be a part of that healing process, that is a game changer. I mean, if police officers, you're typically dealing with that with a lot of cases. I mean, if they themselves can even understand how they're coming across to somebody, then they can become part of that solution that doesn't add to the fire, as you mentioned, right? They can be a part of the solution that calms that person down or whatever it is. And now that police officer becomes a better resource for the person. The pastor at the church or the congregation at the church becomes a better resource for the people that are members of the church or people that need help. Even in an organization, for people to look at, right? If you're an owner of a company or you're an HR, you're even a coworker, right? Like you can identify these things and say, hey, are you aware? Hey, something really bad happened. Are you aware of these different healing methods? And more importantly, if you're not, like, go to the Trauma Healing Project, and you can get help. You can get resources. Just being aware of that is like 99% of it.
It is, and just to add to your point about folks that are kind of working on the front lines or really engaging with people in this way, our real frontline folks are friends and family. By the time somebody is engaging in a child welfare system or going to their pastor for counseling around domestic violence or engaging with law enforcement or showing up in an emergency room, a lot of things have already gone down. And mostly, we did some research 10 years ago now, listening to survivors in our community, and we asked them who they turned to for support in their lives, and mostly they turned to friends and family first. And then we asked what the quality of support they got was, and it wasn't so good. So we turned to each other first. And actually, if we knew what to do when somebody turned to us, as a parent, as a friend, as an extended family member, if we knew what to do in those moments, people might not end up so much in those other systems. Those are almost last resort systems, and everybody knows it, and that's how they're run. So we can make those better all day long, and that will make a really big difference. But it's much earlier in the reaching out that we see the possibility of sort of a bigger impact.
Yeah.
Is making sure that any one of us who comes in contact with somebody who's in pain has some sense of how to support them, how to validate and acknowledge, and then where other resources and support exist that we could turn to for support and help.
So true. Yeah, very, very, very true. I mean, yeah, the people that are, at home, your friends, your family, the mainly family though, right? Because these are people you're interacting with first, and your go-to before anybody else. And what you're doing, really, the Trauma Healing Project is providing that preventative measure so they don't go into these other systems, and which are, like you said, are last resort systems. I mean, these are not designed. They're designed, as I see it, to treat the symptoms that are a big part of the problem. And what you guys are doing is treating the problem and trying to fix the problem, which is really what is needed to be a part of that solution.
Well, it's almost multi-layered. It's any point of contact can be either a reaction to or a misinformed effort to stop something hard from happening or to respond to it. Or could be supporting and facilitating healing and recovery. Yeah. And so we're trying to flip every door so that people at least have baseline understanding of the benefit of feelings, for example, or how to listen when somebody's sharing their story in a way that is facilitating rather than shutting down the healing process. Those kinds of baseline minimum capacities would make a very big difference. And then for those of us that are impacted by trauma, we actually really need to know what's possible too. Like, I've been told all my life, for example, that if I'd been sexually abused, that it means that I'll always suffer, and that I can learn to manage it, but that I won't ever really fully heal from it. And then further, people go on to say things like, and that will make you stronger. The things that don't kill you will make you stronger. And that's kind of a misguided response, and a very low expectation. I mean, we understand it and it makes sense in the face of some of what we've been through, but that is a very low expectation. Me knowing that actually I can recover from even the most horrific traumatic experiences I've had, and then a little bit of information about what can help blows open the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. So, Elaine, tell us about where the organization is going. What's your future? Where do you see? I mean, the work you're doing is clearly part of the solution. Everything that I talk about on the podcast, right? Being a part of the solution, not part of the problem. What you're doing is you're providing a solution to the problem by and understanding these things, understanding trauma, understanding every component of it, every layer of it, as we talked about a lot today. But where do you see this growing? I mean, you guys just said you're growing really fast right now. What does that look like here in the next year, 2 years, 100 years kind of thing?
So I know that a lot of social service agencies that are doing direct service in particular use the phrase, I'm trying to work myself out of a job, a lot. If things were going really well, we'd work ourselves out of a job. I think actually that there is going to be a need for continuous learning and knowledge sharing and practice opportunities around healing trauma, probably for the rest of human history, and whether it's coming from an organization or a human future rather than history, forever, and how that looks is probably going to change. But I would say that our part in that now and for the next couple of years is actually to really grow our own capacity to learn about and promote into the wider community the kinds of modalities, the kinds of practices, the kinds of processes that really facilitate and promote healing. And what that means to us is really sort of building out the structure of a learning community. We have practitioners coming, volunteering, or taking very little pay to provide direct services here. And over here, we have this training and consultation world and work that kind of helps us pay for this healing program. And we're ready to actually integrate those two so that what we have are practitioners who come really to a practicum or residency opportunity where they get to provide those direct healing resources that they are trained up in, and have licenses to provide while they're learning with us, and teaching us about really facilitating healing at a deeper level. So, for example, a massage therapist or a yoga teacher coming and training with us while providing those resources in kind of a practicum or a residency way, so that they are studying with us around how to do those things in a trauma sensitive way, but also being able to give back to the community so that we have a flow of new practitioners, new participants who are learning about what they need to heal and learning about how they can provide support for healing, sort of in a flow that is continuous and very, very sustainable. And we need, really what we need to do that is bring in, is really flesh out that model and bring in more staff and support, and community partners to really build what might be looked at as a school or a training program that is really, really fully engaging both community members who need healing and community practitioners who want to learn more about how to offer it, so that those two worlds that are parallel and overlapping in some ways, where that overlap gets much more intentional. And so that we are the place people want to come and train and give and learn and try, and experiment and gain knowledge about healing. That it's kind of a hub, I would say, a learning community. And I think we're on our way, but I think that's our next big move, is to really build out the structure to be that learning community in a very formal, explicit, thoughtful way.
Yeah, that's awesome. How does so somebody who's curious, a big part of these interviews is to just build curiosity and kind of get the backstory right. But taking the next step, right? For somebody, people that out there that are looking to, how do I support this organization? How do I become part of that solution? And I know you mentioned about gaining community partners, gaining the people that have the talents and the skills that can help. And everything else, but and obviously, going to your website I would imagine is probably one of the ways to learn more, which is for everybody. It's the healing. So it's healingattention.org. So again, it's healingattention.org. But what are some of the other ways, Elaine, that people can support you?
There are so many ways. Supporting the mission. So we formed a nonprofit to support the project, but the project is the thing that needs support, and that is the project of trauma healing. And so probably the main way people can support that mission of making sure that anybody impacted by trauma is supported to recover and heal is by learning about and practicing healing in your own worlds. Having people really learn locally, intrapersonally, and intra-organizationally, how they can get involved in promoting and supporting healing of trauma. And trauma is kind of a symbolic sort of framework in a way. We're hurt in lots of different ways, and some of those are traumatic and some of those are not, but really understanding the process and supports to human healing from adversity, and then practicing it wherever you exist, wherever you have influence. So that's number one. If you want to learn more about that and get more training, we provide training and consultation to people that are wanting to build that knowledge base within their own professional practice, within their own sort of community connections, as friends and family, and at an organizational level. So people can access our training and our consultation resources. And we have a couple coming up. There's a trauma-informed care basics training on May 4th. I think it's 12:30 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And then the next day from 1 to 4 Pacific time, there's going to be a training on advanced training on crisis prevention and de-escalation and recovery. So those things kind of are continual. And if people are interested, they can just find us and sign up for our our newsletter or, sign up for those. And we can post the links for those 2 trainings. The other thing is if you're in the Eugene Springfield area and you're really excited about bringing your modality of practice into a space where you can work directly with survivors of trauma, we'd love to hear from you. If you're a body worker, an energy worker, a mindfulness practitioner, a yoga or movement sort of instructor or teacher, we'd love to talk with you about that. And then, of course, it is not last and it is not least. We have really grown our contracts and our ability to have earned revenue coming in our doors, but that does not cover actually our healing arts services to people who are impacted as well as it should yet. So we accept donations from folks. We also are happy to partner with and moving towards partnering more often with corporations and other sponsors that might want to be associated with this work. So lots and lots of ways to be connected to us directly, but also doing the work in your own worlds yourselves and committing to that effort.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Elaine, this has been awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome story. I mean, for those of you, again, be sure to check out healingattention.org. Again, it's healingattention.org. Learn about everything, what they're doing. I mean, they have a ton. Elaine, you have a lot of events. I mean, when you said you have events coming up, I'm going down through, I'm like scrolling. I'm still scrolling. I'm like, man, yeah, you're not kidding about that. That's for sure. Yeah,
well, and just to make the point that people can access us virtually. Those 2 trainings I mentioned, for example, are going to be virtual. So people are coming to us from around the world at this point to sort of join in on those. So there's not a limit geographically right this minute to how we can be connected. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially, if you're learning about some of these things, you're inspired by this interview and you're a police officer, know a police officer or a chief of police, or, even in your church, even going back to your church and saying, hey, this exists, and here's one way we can get involved, is huge. So. Well,
and I would also suggest that people look around in your local communities, because when we started, this was a kind of we were squeaky wheels and making a lot of noise. But since then, the understanding of trauma and trauma-informed care has exploded, around the globe. And so there are lots of coalitions and efforts in many, many, many communities already working on this. So if you're curious about this work, look in your own communities first. You've got a lot going on. I would bet in most of the places where folks listening to this podcast live. So look around in your own. Just put in the search term trauma-informed care, and then put the name of your city or your town in there and see what comes up. So you'll be surprised and pleased, I think, to find local folks thinking about this.
Yeah. Just awesome to know that there's great organizations all around us, as you mentioned, but there's really, as I see it, thought leaders in the industry, thought leaders such as yourself, Elaine, and the organization, the Trauma Healing Center. And it's just, that right there is comforting, and to know, hey, you have a resource, something happens, right? You can be the resource by knowing where to, by sharing this information, by sharing your organization and pointing somebody in the right direction. Or if you had trauma happen, right? You have a resource that's available to you. So we don't always think about these things until we need them. Or we're around somebody directly that is going through that. So we're trying to think, how do we help? How do we help? And, right here, so if you go to healingattention.org, start there, right? Start there. What a better way to get involved and to be a part of that solution. Any last words, Elaine, before we hop off?
I think, to any of us that have carried trauma for a really long time and have been discouraged about the possibility of healing, and for those of us around, family members, friend and family that have had folks, loved ones really impacted by trauma, I think it's really important for us to hold out the expectation and the possibility and the knowledge of healing. It's happening all around us. Trauma certainly has happened all around us, but the real driver is healing and recovery that we can tap into in ourselves and in our communities. And so healing is absolutely not just possible. It is happening, and we can be intentional about it. And thanks for listening to this podcast.
Absolutely. Elaine, you definitely are a part of the solution. You're everything we talk about here at the Missions That Made Them, and I'm so glad to have you on. It's so great to know that there's great organizations just like yours that are making a difference to the people you're part of the people and organizations that are making a difference. And for you out there, you can be a part of that difference just by hitting share on this video. Hitting share on this video. Be sure to subscribe to the Missions That Made Them here. Be sure to smack the bell if you're on YouTube here, so you get notified when we come out with new episodes. And again, you can be a part of that solution just by sharing too. I mean, that's where this part of this solution. What's where all of this starts, right? Is by building awareness. So we need your help by sharing that. And with that said, thanks again for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.